Every year as we approach harvest, we have to look at the conditions that we have out there in preparation for harvest and in what we need to do to get our combines and the rest of our equipment ready to successfully execute that harvest event that's about to come up. Some years that means we're having growing degree accumulations like this year where things are going along quickly. Harvest should be here before too long, and we should be looking at dry corn to harvest. In other years, the growing degree day accumulation is slower, and we're going to be looking at wetter conditions and having to compensate for that as we harvest. Regardless, if we look back to a year like 2017's harvest and what we had to deal with dry shanks and dry grain where we had a lot of head shatter with our ears as they came down, we needed to look to tools like the Yield Saver that I have here as an opportunity to cushion those ears to get the maximum yield into the combine and to avoid kernel loss. But with that came some unintended consequences that we maybe weren't thinking about last year, but we definitely need to think about this year. And that's what I want to discuss today. I'm Keith Byerly, Precision Ag Manager at Central Valley Ag, and this is your agronomy focus video that corresponds with my article on the CVA blog site. So when we look at a traditional cornfield, what we're looking for is that opportunity to get maximum kernels into the combine. When we look at Yield Savers, what we need to justify out there to see Yield Savers be profitable in a year in and year out basis is about a 2 bushel an acre difference between our gathering chains and our Yield Savers in that capture. In some years like last year where we had dry corn, that was very easy to do. In other years, it's going to be much tougher. We obviously don't know what next year is going to entail for us. So what other opportunities, what other costs are hidden around our farm that help us justify an investment in something like this? So I'm talking to you, the growers that focus on corn on your operations, whether that's 10% of your acres or 100% of your acres are corn on corn. We know that volunteer corn is an issue for you, regardless of what the conditions are. When we have years like this where we have damage on some of our fields, that issue is magnified by small kernels of grain going into the combine head and more challenging conditions to make sure that kernels of grain don't end up on the ground. If we have as little as 1 kernel per square foot out there, we have the opportunity to see several thousand, if not tens of thousands, of volunteer plants growing in our cornfields next spring. Those plants lead to increased competition in the early growth stages, especially around that V4 to V6 timeframe when our plants are determining the number of rows around on that cob. That competition for water and nutrients at that time really is where a lot of our yield lag comes from the corn on corn farming system. It's not necessarily just the nitrogen tie-up that we have from the residue. It's not just the pathogens and the diseases and things like that are left in the soil from a corn on corn rotation, but it's the combination of all three, and that combination changes year in and year out. If we can eliminate, say, 10,000 or 15,000 of those volunteer plants by using a tool like Yield Savers and getting down to just a couple of thousand volunteer plants an acre growing into that next season, imagine what that opportunity is to increase your overall yield on your corn on corn acres. So that's my challenge for you today. I want you to think not just about Yield Savers, but about all sorts of different things like rippers and tillage implements and all sorts of different factors on your farm that you may not be able to justify from a single standpoint on cost, but when you look at the extenuating circumstances and you look at the system approach, how what you do this year might influence next year and the year down the road, and you evaluate those costs with your FSA or your trusted advisor, you'll find opportunities where spending a little bit of money up front gives you an opportunity to be more profitable on the backside. I think Yield Savers is a prime example of that. Regardless of what the harvest conditions that we have this year are or your yields, they can help us manage a problem like volunteer corn to make sure we have more successful 2019 and beyond yields.